All right, guys. So I have my past client, Erin, on here with me today, and I'm so excited for us to dive into all things diet culture. And just we're just gonna have a really authentic conversation about just healing your relationship to food, body image, and exercise. And I could not be more excited today. So, Erin, why don't you give us a little introduction of yourself, your journey, what led you to reach out to me in particular, and your why?
Hello, Emily. It's so good to see you again. Let's see, I finished the course about 2 weeks ago, I think, 2 weeks ago. So it's great to see you. Um, so I'm in my early 40s. I was a kid of the 80s. So definitely, had the low fat foods all around me growing up. My mom was always on a diet. I'll say she never ever commented on my own body, but I could just see how she related to her own and that kind of diet culture mentality. And just in terms of like childhood, I remember starting around the age of like 9 or 10, starting to be aware of my body. And I was a little bit bigger than my friends and not as athletic. So I think that just set me up for, frankly, like decades of, trying different diets, low carb. I did fasting. I've tried all the things, certainly like calorie restriction. And I think what really hit me was last spring. I had this moment where I realized a couple, weeks in a row, I thought, it's like I don't even know how to eat anymore. I felt like I was overeating at every meal. And I just kept getting past the point of comfortable fullness. And I don't know, I just had this moment where I said to my husband, it's like I don't know how to read my body anymore. And I felt like I was thinking about food all the time. So that started kind of like my journey into looking like, is there anything else better out there? Or am I just like stuck on this sort of diet, like rat, the wheel, the hamster wheel? And sorry, that's my dog saying hello in the background. And so I started to actually read about intuitive eating, and I read the book by, let's see, Elaine Resch and something Tribbley.
Evelyn, yeah.
Thank you, Evelyn Tribbley. And so I actually thought, like, okay, great, I've read the book, I'm good, I'll just implement it. And for about a week and a half, I was able to implement a lot of the principles, and I felt really good. And then all of a sudden, all of my sort of old habits came crashing back. And at the time, I actually blamed my hormones. I thought, oh, this is just my natural cycle. But I realized, I thought to myself, like, no, there's a lot more deeper work I need to do here. So that's when I started looking classes. And the reason I came to you, Emily, is I had been following a lot of dietitians on Instagram, and I just really liked your style. I felt like you had a very kind, warm, but also direct way of speaking, to people, and I appreciated that. So yeah, I reached out to you, and then the rest is history over the last 4.5 months. So.
hmm I love that. I love that. Yeah, no, I kind of it's weird. It's like whenever I have clients reach out to me from Instagram, I'm like, I'm hoping I'm getting my message across, right? Because like I'm trying to be so like empathetic, but I also like I'm a very direct person. Like to me, sometimes we need to have that like tough love when it comes to things like this, because when it comes to, the reality of how short life is, it's like I just want people to heal their relationship to food, because it's like if you delay that process, it's like you're just missing out on so much that life has to offer because of all the like BS information that we get out there from dieting and just diet culture. And I don't know about you, but I feel like it's getting worse these days because of just like how many people are on social media, and like there's just so much noise. Do you feel like that was kind of like one of your breaking points, just hearing all these things?
Yes, I think, and not only so much noise, but I think where things have gotten worse compared to like the 90s is now it's couched in wellness. And so I think like unless you are on a plan or following somebody or doing something, you obviously, don't care about your health, or you're letting yourself go. And it's really couched in this sort of, let me talk out 1 second. We're keeping this really real, Emily. All right. Sorry. I think that, you know, a lot of the times it's if you really peel back the layers, you can see it's the same old diet culture as it always has been, but it has sort of this pretty kind of wrapping on it, which makes it look like it's about caring for your health, when really I think it's a lot of the same kind of themes that we've been seeing now for decades.
hmm No, I completely agree. And I can honestly say that I feel like what we're seeing as wellness these days is really just disordered eating and like eating disorder, promoting eating disorders. Because if you really think about it, like a lot of the things that are mass as wellness these days, like back in the day, that's exactly what I was doing at the depths of my eating disorder was like, I was like not having, solid meals throughout the day. I was like not listening to my body. I was fasting. I was like thinking carbs were bad. I was like, eating low calorie. And it's like, yeah. And I lost so much weight. I lost so much of my life. I literally had no life at that point. And so it's just, especially like I think exercise too. So many people have those Apple Watches these days. It's so normalized to be so obsessed with every single metric of like how many calories you're eating, what are your macros, like what are your steps? And it's like, that was when I was doing my absolute worst with my mental health. And I totally agree with you how it's just so mass as wellness these days and why people aren't really sure what even is healthy anymore because of all the disconnect that's created through these things. Do you
Absolutely.
agree?
Yes, absolutely. And then if anything, people are congratulated, like, oh, I went, 16 hours without eating. It's like, oh, that's awesome. Good work. Can you do it again? Or, all these various plans. Or, I haven't eaten carbs in 3 weeks. And, people are congratulated on these things when they're cutting entire macronutrients. So, yeah, I feel like it's almost more sinister in that way because, and with social media, it's everywhere. You kind of can't escape it.
Hmm.
That's another change, I think, from decades past.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear what was your why for wanting to heal your relationship with food after so many years of just being exposed to diet culture? Like, did you have anything external or internal that you're like, I really just need to work on this now in this at this point in my life?
I don't think there was one moment in my life where everything changed. I think I just got really sick of it. And I think one thought that did I remember occur to me as I was like hunting for sort of something better and something different for myself was that I realized years ago, when I was in my 20s, I had, been restricting and exercising, and I had gotten down to what would be like a lower adult weight for me. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, if I could just take off like a few more pounds. And thinking back, I realized like it's never going to be good enough. I will never be at a weight that I'm truly happy. I'll never have, the six pack abs that I was dreaming of. I just am not. It's never going to be enough. And so, for me, I think just the fatigue of always thinking about food and always thinking about changing my body, and then that realization of it's never going to be enough, I think was enough to propel me to look for something else.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And honestly, that's like one of my biggest purposes as a dietitian because it's just, I feel like, especially too, as women, we are so targeted and we fall for it too. It's like how easy is it to see like when you are on social media a transformation picture of like, oh, like this girl, she did this program and now she looks like this. And it's like we don't see the reality of what's going on. Like you can see a picture of somebody and not see what's going on in their internal health. You can see a picture of somebody not realizing that it's photoshopped or like they even changed the lighting. I don't know if you've ever seen it in a transformation picture, but it's like you'll see somebody in like a really terrible lighting and then the transformation picture is like in a completely like dim lighted room with like all like I'm like okay, are people fall for it too, and it's just like I'm like all right. And something that just came to my mind too, it's like whenever we're thinking about somebody who's struggling with food like disordered eating, chronic dieting, I feel like so many of those people obviously are watching that content more. They're more likely to work with coaches that probably are going to make things worse, probably going to make you more body focused. Because I remember back when I was in college, I was actually hired a coach myself as if like a fitness trainer. I was like, if I'm going to gain weight, I'm going to gain weight through muscle. I'm going to like use fitness and tracking macros as like my kind of way to cover up the things that I was struggling with. And I see this more and more, especially in like the online space where there's so many, I feel like young, impressionable women that are going to coaches. And even if somebody has like gained weight, trying to lose weight through going through fitness coaches, and it's like it kind of masks the issue. It's like we can think that they're eating right, but just because we're seeing a coach, it could make things worse. Have you ever worked with an online coach? I'm just curious.
I have not actually. No, you're the first person I've reached out to through Instagram, and I'm really grateful because yeah, I hear of these stories of people linking with people who ultimately I think only make their situation more negative and more difficult. So no, I haven't been really.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear then. You have kids, right? You have
Mhm. I have two kids.
two kids. Is it a boy and a girl?
I have a son and a daughter. So my daughter is 9, and my son is 12.
Okay. I'm curious, do you feel like you're worried about them being exposed to all these things, or was that a motivation for you to work on your own relationship with food?
Absolutely. That was huge. Yeah, so my kids both sort of live in smaller bodies, which is, a different experience than what I had as a kid. And I was in like a little bit bigger of a body as a child. Um, so I don't think that necessarily they're experiencing kind of the world or diet culture in the same way I did. But I am really, really trying to just promote like a healthy attitude about food in our house. And I find myself kind of making some changes in my parenting now after having worked through this course with you. I definitely used to be sort of the whole mindset of like, oh, you have to eat your dinner and then you get dessert. And I start to see like, okay, the way we portray this is affecting them and is changing, how they think about foods and if a food gets put on a pedestal and things like that. So it's affected, my parenting certainly. But more than anything, and regardless of whatever size they are or end up being, I want them to feel good in their bodies. And so for sure. And it really struck me. I remember one time during one of our weekly meetings, you went around the group and asked, what age did you start to feel like you noticed your body or started to feel shame? And mine was 10. And I was just struck in that moment. I thought, oh my gosh, my daughter is 9. Like she seems so small to me, so young. But she's really on the cusp and maybe is already in it of like just starting to hear those messages from other kids and from society. And so that makes me feel even more passionate about creating just like a really safe and healthy environment here at home with regard to food.
I'm really glad that you're aware of that too. And I think sometimes it's worth even reflecting like when these food issues started, because I think typically when we're in middle school, I don't know, something about it. Girls are mean. Like that is a time when I feel like, especially, I mean, I remember back in middle school, I was receiving comments about my body, just like always comparing. Like I feel like middle schoolers are probably like the worst when it comes to like food and body image and having like no filter when it comes to even just like, communicating. So, yeah, I mean, that is definitely something that I think when you have a strong foundation at home, and you have like you're seeing good things from your parents, that really does so, I mean, so much better for your children, because it's like they spend what majority of the day at school, and if they
Mhm.
come home and they see more and more of those behaviors, or like that those are reinforced back at home, it's like it could spiral into an eating disorder. And not all the time, but it's like um definitely what happened to me. And I think even kids who are kind of restricted from certain foods when they're younger, like, oh, you can't have that until you do this, or, you can't have that until the weekend, or like that's a bad food,
Mhm.
sometimes end up growing up with like a more of like a binge type of behavior when it comes to food, because it's like, oh, I was restricted to that so much when I was younger. Now that I have the freedom to like have these things, it's like it does spiral into like overeating or not having like a connection between, am I actually hungry for this, or is this something that like I'm just trying to get in because it's there?
Right. And I couldn't have it before. Something I've started to do is like if they're going for, extras or dessert or whatever, sometimes they'll just say, oh, is that what your body feels like right now? Just to sort of start to create a little bit of a connection of, rather than just like the habitual grabbing of like a dessert or something. And they're like, they'll think about it. They're like, yeah, my body feels like this right now. I'm like, okay, great. Then enjoy that piece of chocolate or something. Because I think looking back, I was really disconnected from my body when regard to eating. Like I would just eat stuff that was around, as an adult and also growing up. But I'm just trying to kind of encourage that with them. And also to what you were saying about middle schoolers, absolutely. It's like even if you're the most average child ever, life is really tough when you're in middle school. And one thing I've tried to do with my kids is when someone will comment on someone else's body, I'll just say, there's no need to comment on someone's body, like end of story. And so I've tried to instill in that there's absolutely no reason to whether someone is small or large or tall or short. It's like it's irrelevant. That's as I hear people say it's the least interesting thing about a person. So that's just something as a parent too that you know I'll just sometimes remind them is that there's no need to comment on their body.
Hmm.
Yeah, passion.
Yeah, no. And the truth is, even if you saw somebody in a certain body, doesn't mean you know how much they're eating, which I think is actually like a big thing, especially when you're younger. Like I had friends growing up, like I've had, friends in smaller bodies, friends in larger bodies, and like they would eat about the same amount. And I think it's because we all go through different growth spurts and we all have different genetics, we have different bodies. And I think even just like being an adult now, you could be eating a lot of food and you still be in a smaller body. You could be in a larger body and be eating a small amount of food, and it doesn't tell the entire story. So it's like I always say it's never good to comment on somebody's body because you have no idea what they're going through inside their head and like what their body's actually going through as a result.
I think one thing too, like I had my sort of obvious goals when I started this class of, oh, I want to have food freedom. I want to heal my relationship with, food. But I think a really interesting change I've noticed in myself from this class is that I have really come to like notice and appreciate body diversity. And this is really hard for me, Emily, but I had to sort of come to the realization that like I had fat bias. I did. I certainly, just because of the world I lived in, I think I would look at someone who was in a bigger body and maybe think like, oh, they don't eat very healthy foods, or maybe they don't move their body that much. And like looking back, I'm horrified. But I think, in order to change attitudes, we have to acknowledge that they're there. And so I think, in taking your course and just really learning more about bodies and food and body size, I just recognize that we're not all meant to be the same size. And gosh, it would be a really boring world if we all look the same. And so that's been something that I've actually had to like come to terms with, is just recognizing that, like you said, some people are going to eat a lot and be very small, and some people, will eat that same amount and be a totally different size. And so that's just been, I think, a really neat change in me. I've noticed. I really celebrate people of all sizes, and like the judgment is gone, which I will honestly say I didn't really realize that the judgment was in me. I think of myself as being like a really accepting, supportive person, but I think those diet rules are deep, and that diet culture is pervasive, and so it's easy for it to kind of seep into your thoughts and your view of things.
No, I completely agree. And something as you were talking, I wanted to even speak upon is just like denial. Because can I ask how old you are?
Yeah, 42.
42. Okay. So because I get a lot of ladies who come to me around your age, 42, and like I mean even just like in their 50s and 60s, and they've been struggling with this for forever, like forever since a teen. And I think sometimes too, it's very easy to kind of get into this denial phase where it's like, this is just the way that I am. This is how I've always been when it comes to food. This is always how I've been when it comes to exercise. I'm always going to hate my body, kind of living in those like self-limiting beliefs of like, I'm not ever going to change. Like, this is just who I am now. Was there ever a part of you that felt that way, or do you ever feel kind of like you were just kind of coexisting through the lens of like dieting?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's all I knew. I think my first diet would have been in high school, but it was all I knew for decades. But I think what actually made me think there was a better way was, like watching your reels and watching your content and other sort of like minded dietitians. And that's, I think, sort of started to put the spark in my mind like, oh, maybe I don't have to diet all the time. Maybe I don't have to have body shame and feel negative. And I will say something else too that's been really really positive for me is to follow content creators that show fashion but have like bodies like I do, like similarly sized bodies. And I think a lot of people will give them grief. At least I hear them sometimes comment on this, so that they'll come out in a bra and underwear and start getting dressed. And I'll see sometimes people will comment like, "Why do you have to come out in your underwear and bra? Like, why is this?" But I will say, just like normalizing all different sizes of bodies is just so important, so important. And so I think that was also really powerful to me to just like see a lot of that self and body love in other people, and like hear you talk about how like, oh my gosh, she can have ice cream and not want to eat the whole thing. Or, for me, it was cookies was very much my, my like pedestal food. And I think it gave me hope. So I think I probably was pessimistic previously, but then as time went on, I started to like see a spark of hope and a spark of light in terms of, my future path with regard to my body and food.
Hmm. No, I totally understand that. And I think too, when it comes to intuitive eating, I think a lot of people associate it with, I'm just going to gain loads of weight. And I think that keeps people from taking action because it's like we associate one thing with an outcome. And I mean, nobody diets for fun, right? We don't develop food rules and like all these behaviors because we want to. It's because it makes you feel like you have something to control. It's like, oh, I can control my body if I'm doing these things. If I just avoid carbs, like I know I don't have to worry about weight gain. If I track my calories, I know this is not going to happen. But it's like sometimes you don't even have control over those things because your body's going to do what your body's going to do. And so I'm curious to hear how do you feel like group coaching helped you out of that when it comes to like the diet mindset? What do you feel like were your biggest key takeaways when it came to just being in Nourish to Thrive and just how did that shape your relationship with food compared to like how it used to be and where it is today?
Yeah. And let me first respond to that by saying that, the course is 16 weeks. And I would say for the first 2 weeks in my mind, I'll be perfectly honest, I was kind of like, okay, so how can I hack intuitive eating to like have food freedom, but also make my body smaller? Like truly, I was still there, still deeply rooted in that goal of wanting my body to be smaller. Um, and so it took a long time to sort of let that go. And I did gain some weight during intuitive eating, and that was like emotionally like a really, really big thing for me to work through. At first, it was really hard. I could see my body changing. I wear a uniform to work, so like I noticed the thing since I wear the same thing over and over again. I was like, okay, that's feeling tighter. Um, and then I think around probably week like 14 of the 16, I actually had this couple of days where I got extremely emotional. It was like I was kind of going through all this stuff in my childhood, things that I remembered, activities I had said no to because I was ashamed of my body, like swimming, things like that. And it was really cathartic. And I'm not a big crier, and I cried for like 2 days straight. And I really think with that, I like released a lot of this desire to like shrink my body. And since then, and so much clicked for me in the final weeks of the course. But it was like I just came to another place and much better place. So it was a struggle. I started off, I mean, even in the class, I was still thinking like almost scheming, like how can I make this work, almost function like a diet. And what helped me, I would say, I mean, the weekly meetings were fantastic. I really appreciated our group. We were all from different backgrounds and different ages. And I think everybody just had such, great perspective and their own perspective to add. And I really liked the fact that I could write you at any time with questions or, hey, I remember writing you about my uniform being small. And I'm like, okay, Emily, what do I do? And you're like, let's get a bigger size. And it seems so, clear, but that was a hard thing to do. So that was really helpful. Yeah, I really like sometimes we did group challenges and I really enjoyed those. And your modules were really wonderful too. So I think everything put together it's very comprehensive. And I always just felt like you were really responsive, the others were responsive. It's like it was just a good like a good kind of cushion because really you're making yourself very vulnerable when you give up all the rules you've lived by. Even though they're not serving you anymore, it's what you know. And that's really scary. And so I felt really like comforted by everybody in the group.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. And I will say each and every group is so different. And I think that like just having that group community, I think goes such a long way when it comes to like this journey because it's such a healing journey. And I want people to know that a couple things is that yes, it's about the food, but it's so much more. It
Yeah.
is so much more than just hunger and fullness cues. Like it goes so deep, so much deeper than that. Like there's so much to unpack. And that's kind of why I do make my coaching 16 weeks is because like we can't just cover it in 1 month. We can't just cover that in like a little app or like a 6 week course. Like there's so much to unpack. And if we're not unpacking the hard things, having those hard conversations, you're gonna feel stuck. Like I've always talked about quasi recovery, and like I was kind of in that place for so long until I realized there was a lot of deeper healing that needed to be done. And so, one thing I want to just even provide for people is just a safe space where they can unpack that. They can have girls who get it, girls who are going to be on their team, their side. And, that's how we see healing. It's not just about, I'm just going to listen to my body because if you don't work on what's
Mhm.
going on in your head, like you're going to be kind of recovered, but you're always going to be kind of recovered. And there's so
Absolutely.
much more than just being kind of recovered. It's like I want to be fully recovered. I want to be able to like go out and have spontaneous dinner dates. I want to be able to go out with my friends and not have to worry about pre-planning my entire week around it. It's like, I think also too, kind of speaking back to like the whole weight situation, if you're also still so focused on a particular weight, I need to maintain this certain size forever.
Mhm.
I'm gonna just give you like a little disclaimer that your body's always going to change. You're not going to have the same body in your 20s that you are going to have in your 80s. And if you don't work on healing the body image now, you're going to be suffering your entire life trying to just maintain something that's going to take so much away from your life of like, I don't want to be 80 years old and being like, oh, I can't believe I spent my entire life trying to be a size zero. Like, I can't believe I spent my entire life saying no to fun things because I never worked on my relationship with food. I never healed the relationship that I have with myself. So being able to heal all of like, the food issues, the body image issues, the exercise issues, the compulsions, the behaviors, like that is something that we have to heal in order for intuitive eating to feel like it's actually working.
Yeah. And I had heard podcasts about, people going through the emotional work. And honestly, until I did it, I didn't really know what that meant. I thought, oh, I read the book. I'm good. I know the principles, you know? And so I think you don't know what you don't know. And so I really had to go through and just like listen to your modules, do the reflection questions, go to the weekly groups and talk and like hash it out and kind of dig deeper. Because I didn't even realize what I needed to go through. And that was huge. And I remember one day, to speak to the age, our body's changing. I remember one time you said to our group, I don't want to be a grandma making cookies with my grandkids and not being able to eat one, or like measuring things out. And that really stuck with me because, I work in healthcare and I sometimes work with, older people, and I've definitely seen those people who clearly have eating issues and they're elderly, and it breaks my heart because it's like, okay, when is it time to stop this? When can you not worry about this anymore? And so that was really powerful for me. Um, and I just wish I had done it sooner. And some of the people in our group were younger than me, and I just kept thinking like, wow, such kudos to you, because this would have been really fantastic to have this mindset shift years ago. And so, yeah, I think it's never too early to work on your relationship with food.
Mhm. Yeah, and I want to even add to that because we do so much body image work in Nurse Thrive. And I know there's ladies probably listening who are like, I kind of want to lose weight though. Like there's a part of me that still wants to lose weight, but I also don't want to be dieting forever. How do I go
Yeah.
about that? And for anybody listening who's in that position, I want to validate those desires to lose weight because, again, that's what we're always taught as women. It's like you're not good enough until you're this size. You're not good enough until you look like this person. And, I think too on social media, women often compare themselves to like people's before picture. Like they see before and after and like, oh, like because I look like the before picture, that means there's something wrong with my body and I need to go do something to change it. But it's like you said, Erin, it's like there's never going to be a weight where it's good enough. You're always going to be like, oh, well, I reached this goal weight, but I'm not thin enough. I'm not strong enough. Like there's always going to be this tug and pull of like losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight.
Mhm.
And that's going to wreck your body the more and more that you do it. And I'm not about quick fixes or like you doing something that's going to harm your health long term. I want people to be able to, dive into intuitive eating, learn what their body needs without having to go through such extremes. And I promise you, your body's going to end up where it needs to be, whether that be if you're somebody who's been binge eating and wants to lose weight, that could happen for you.
Yeah.
But it's not going to happen if you keep doing these extremes. It's going to happen when you take a more sustainable approach to food. And, with intuitive eating, it's all about healing the mind. It's not just about the foods that you're eating. It's like when you do the work up here, it translates into the foods that you give your body. Because when we have this history of chronic dieting, it's going to throw off hunger and fullness signaling. So, like if you've had like rapid weight loss, it's going to increase your desire to eat. Therefore, it tricks your brain into thinking that you're not able to be trusted with food because you want food so much. And people have this fear of like, my brain's telling me I want everything. I want all the cookies in the house. I want all the snacks after dinner. And it's like, it's because you've been dieting. It's because you're tricking your body in those hunger and fullness signals to want more food. It
Yeah.
doesn't, your body does not want you to be starving. It
Mhm.
wants you to be fed. And I'm all for like helping my clients be in, I mean, little plug here, nourish to thrive. That's the whole premise of like what I teach my clients is like, I want you to nourish your body, not deprive it, so you can
Yes.
actually be healthy. And again, intuitive eating is not anti-health. It means actually getting your body healthy so that you don't have to be dieting forever.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple points on that. About a week ago, no, actually, it was about a couple weeks ago when I was having this very emotional couple of days. I actually pulled out, this will really date me, but I pulled out some photo albums because people used to print pictures and put them in photo albums. And I looked at some pictures of from my childhood, so from middle school and high school. And in my mind, I remember being like bigger than all my friends. A lot of my friends were athletes. I was a musician. I played the violin, and so I just had a different body type than they did. And I just felt a lot of like shame growing up about that. And I opened up these photo albums, and to my surprise, I didn't look that different than my friends. And I was really kind of shocked by that. And I had this moment of like, okay, there's some body dysmorphia going on here. Like, I think in my mind, I'm seeing a different shape than what is reality. There's that. And second of all, this is like this is my body. Like, I looked generally very close to what I do now, but just, a younger, less matured body. And so that in a weird way gave me some peace that I just thought, like, I'm fighting the nature, I'm fighting my genes a little bit by constantly trying to change genes, as in GENES, not the genes you wear, but fighting my genetics there on like trying to make my body a different way. When clearly, since I was a kid, this is what my body was happy looking like. And the second point I wanted to make is that with regard to kind of that set point weight, I told a friend the other day, I said, I really feel like I've accepted my body. Um, do I wish it were a little smaller? Sure. I mean, I can admit that, absolutely, you know, but I'm not mad at it anymore. And I saw a picture of myself the other day with some friends, and it was not a flattering picture. And for the first time, maybe ever, I wasn't sad and disgusted and angry. I just was like, oh, okay. And it was very neutral. And that was an interesting sort of sign of recovery for me because I think pictures can be really triggering. But I think there's just this acceptance of like, okay, this is what my body is happy being like. It has been like this for a long time. I'm eating a very comfortable point where I feel like I'm not having to work and I'm, work at keeping my body a certain size and I'm feeling nourished and satisfied and this is what it wants to be. And I can accept that,
Yeah.
so, and I think that's a wonderful thing that you talked about is this idea of like, that perhaps the goal isn't body positivity, but neutrality. Like, why do we need to put so much effort into feeling one way or the other about our body? And instead, let's just focus on recognizing what it does, appreciating it, and accepting it. And, we can have wishes about it, but at the end of the day, this is the one body we have. And life is going to be a lot more pleasant if you make peace with that.
Hmm. I love that. Oh my gosh, that was such a great little spiel on body image. But so I want to hear because I know you've shared so many wins of like even just like breakthroughs throughout the entire 16 weeks. How do you feel like your relationship with food is now? Like I know you've talked about going on trips, how it's affected like your family dynamic. Do you want to
Mhm.
talk about that?
Absolutely. I think one thing, this was actually week 1 or 2 in the course. We were going through our weekly goals and, I said, well, something I notice is when I'm making dinner, I'm really hungry. So I start to eat while I'm making dinner. And, if your meal takes a while to prep, you might get kind of a hefty snack, a hearty snack doing that. And then I would sit down to dinner and I would eat a meal and then I would be like so uncomfortably full. So you were like, Erin, why don't you try having an afternoon snack? And, I have kids. When I think of snacks, I think of like toddlers. And there was part of me that thought, oh, I'm an adult. I should be able to make it from lunch to dinner. That's, not that long of a period. But I started adding in a snack every day between, just depends on when I get hungry, but like 3 to 5. And it was so life changing. And I think adding that snack in has just set me up into so much better of a pattern. I think it makes me have a really kind of comfortable relationship with my dinner meal because I'm not so ravenous. I also feel like I don't have to eat past the point of fullness at lunch because I know I'm going to have to go 6, 7 hours without eating. So like that one little change, I think was a really huge step in, my progress there. And I'd say now, I'm I'd say quite good at like checking in with my body and knowing when I want something. I really focus on making or eating foods that sound good, and sometimes that's a salad, and sometimes it's like the other day I had peanut butter and jelly and Cheetos for lunch, and it's like really what sounded good. And so I was like, that's my lunch today. And then the next day it might be something totally different. And it's been pretty amazing honoring my cravings in that way. Of before a meal, this is something I wouldn't have done, but I'm like, what sounds good? Do I want something like crunchy or hot or cold or salty? And just taking that moment. And that's something I never did before. I typically just ate what I thought I should, based on diet rules. So yeah, I mean, my relationship with food is completely different, and I still enjoy sweets and desserts and things like that, but I don't have the immense guilt after I eat them. It's just you eat it and you move on and you enjoy it while you have it. So all in all, I would say very big shift on food.
Oh, I love that. I love like the PB&J instance because I know we talked all about like foods that we love. Like I loved our group. I loved our group because we talked about like feta cheese and like all these snacks. Like I loved our like little food conversations because it's like sometimes you can actually get like a lot of ideas from other people of like having different meals. Because I think there was another client in our group who she was like, I've never had feta cheese, and I'm like, we need to get you on feta cheese because
Girl, you
yeah,
need to
like
have some feta.
so I think even just to having going back to like having that group dynamic, it's like you can learn from each other. Like you can learn from other people, and like I think just having that, especially when you're going through such a really hard process, and I don't think people understand like how hard it can be from going from like tracking calories or macros or even just following certain diet plans into actually listening to your body. It is so freaking hard when you first get started. But no, I love to hear that you feel like it's just coming a lot more easy and natural for you now, which is honestly the end goal. Because I know it can be such a struggle for like at least the first month or so.
Absolutely. And I think something else that helped, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on like nutrition. So I felt like, oh, I know how to like put together a proper plate or whatever. But I think just having been sort of a victim of like the low carb era, I always would scoff at that and like push, like I would make my kids pasta and not eat it, which also sends some weird messages to my kids. But I would, I think I had some sort of faulty beliefs on how the plate should be set up. So I think it was really helpful too to talk to you about like, okay, what kind of things should we be working into each meal and each snack, and to keep us satisfied, to help keep us full a little bit longer, and those kind of things. And that was really really helpful too. And now I'm telling my family about it, and I'm like, well, you should really be doing this, this and this. And my mom was never a breakfast eater, and now is. And she told me the other day, she's like, "Yeah, I get hungry now and get excited for that, and I'm ready. When I wake up, I'm yearning for that." And I just think in terms of supporting our body and supporting our hormones and just learning how to, nourish the body. These suggestions you had were just so helpful. So yeah, that's been cool.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and one like a little last question for anybody who's listening who's curious about intuitive eating, and maybe they're curious about other things like, dieting or tracking macros. Why do you feel like people should pursue this journey if they've been struggling with food for a long time?
Yeah. I think I think that, we all deserve better, right? We don't deserve to like live a life where you feel less than body wise, or where you feel like you're constantly in a struggle. I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, like your body is in charge. Your body's going to do what it wants to do. And sure, you can get on a diet and lose some weight, absolutely. But at some point, your body's, innate needs are going to kick into gear so heavily that you're going to likely go back to, a different form of eating that's maybe not compatible with that diet. And then you're going to just, potentially gain the weight back, and it's like rinse and repeat. And it's like if you don't want to be on the roller coaster anymore, this is, I think, a way to kind of move forward in a way that's just really loving of your body, and also just can help you get into a much better mental space. And I think, I have all these Emily quotes that live rent free in my head now, but another thing you said was that intuitive eating is eating without, it was what eating used to be before diet culture. And I was like, oh yeah, like in a way there's nothing special about intuitive eating. It really is just eating. But it's special because diet culture is so pervasive and so ingrained that it takes a lot of work to get that away and get that out of there. But in many ways it's really like basic to listen to your body. We just have to be taught how to do it. We see kids do it. Kids naturally, I think, are pretty darn intuitive eaters. But sadly, we kind of stamp that out of them, as parents and culturally. So I would just say, yeah, if someone is sick of being on the sort of, you know, the roller coaster of diets, I would say, look into this. And I think group support was really powerful, and just having that kind of camaraderie and sharing the wins with people and then sharing your struggles. And I think it makes it more meaningful and certainly easier to meet your goal when you have that support.
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I second that because, obviously I advocate for intuitive eating. And I think just, obviously too, for anybody listening, intuitive eating, it's so nuanced. It's so nuanced. And I think a lot of people hate on it because they don't understand it in its entirety. So before you jump to conclusions, thinking that intuitive eating is like another set of rules or another diet, or I just want to give you that reminder that intuitive eating is normal eating without diet culture. It is
Yeah.
normal eating. And I think we've become so disconnected as a culture of what that looks like
Mhm.
because, we have like people that are like, oh, like if you're not on a diet, you're promoting obesity and like I'm like, no, no, like that's like,
No.
no, that's absolutely like not what intuitive eating is about. So I think just having a clear understanding of like what it actually is and what that means in your life is like what I'm all about. So just take that with a grain of salt, especially when you see things on social media before you make a conclusion of like what's going to be the best for you. But if you have any questions about, intuitive eating or Nourish to Thrive, you're more than welcome to hop in my DMs and like send me a message or even just apply and we can chat about what's going to be the best fit for you. But thank you so much, Erin, for hopping on here today. I know this is really going to speak volumes to so many women.
Thank you. I mean, you're just such an important person in my life, and it's really good to see you again on video. I miss our weekly talks, and yeah, you're a really incredibly positive force online and in many people's lives. So thank you, and thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you.